you, Chairman. Thank you, President, for having made, after so many endeavors, once again this forum, which year after year was increasing its own prestige and authoritativeness. I do remember that at the beginning, on its first edition, we didn't have more than 150 participating entrepreneurs. Today, we see some 750 entrepreneurs in this audience. I would like to make a few considerations because a number of data were provided as far as Russia is concerned. Let me just confine myself to giving other informations. As of October the 1st, the foreign indebtedness of the Russian Federation was $725 billion. In a year, it went down by 23%, and ever since the beginning of 2015, it went down by 13%. The currency reserves have gone up to $374 billion, thus allowing Russia to be one of the first 10 worldwide countries owning and having any such record. For the gold reserve volumes, Russia is ranking amongst the first top countries, 5 countries, with 5 tons of gold. And whenever we talk about the default of Russia, this is obviously sort of an answer. On October the last, the Council of Ministers was approving the federal draft, budgetary draft for the year 2016. The 13 billion rubles were the profits envisaged, and the liabilities were equal to 23 billion rubles, 2.3 rubles, sorry. And in Russia, without them having any obligation, Vladimir Putin established that the 3% of the GDP should never be exceeded as an unbalanced situation in the year. Now, why did I say that? I said that because substantially the World Bank has analyzed 3 scenarios of the group of the Russian economy, which envisages the ongoing of sanctions against Moscow and increase also in the population. Notwithstanding all this, it's convinced that in the future years, the Russian economy will undergo structural transformations, after which the volume of new industries will increase, whilst the role in the sector of oil and raw oil is going to increase. I've been present for more than 55 years, first in Russia and then in the Soviet Union first and then in Russia afterwards. And I know that I now see some 35 plants existing in Russia, but I can tell you that the Italian partnership with Russia is and has always been a long-term partnership. It started at I'm not wanting to say that it dates back to the Tsar period. I don't want to go back into centuries. Initially, there was even a trade in terms of fur, trade exchanges. And if Italy has had one of the highest levels attained in the fur sector, it was due to the fact that it was importing furs from Russia at the time of the County of Moscow. And let me say, and this is something for our young minister, we know that in the first 1960s, 1964, there was a first chamber of commerce made in Russia, and it now has celebrated the first 50 years celebration and anniversary. They chose Italy as a partner, and already in the 60s, and let's not speak of the 50s, there have been 3 components that Italy has had in the long term with the Soviet Union, one of which was the cultural plan, then the famous exchanges between Milan and Lombardy, the Piccolo Teatro, La Scala, and all that was marking a long cultural period. The second one was affecting the touristic sector, and at the time of Soviet Union, Italy was organizing a number of trips to Soviet Union, cultural trips. The same applied with entrepreneurs. The Chamber of Commerce was made in 1964 with the institutions of the then Soviet Union, and in 1966 a first contract was signed of the Fiat automobile sector. In 1966, the first contract was signed, the first gas contract between the European Union and Italy. Now, why am I saying all this? Because notwithstanding the many Cold War periods, the Chamber of Commerce and Italy have always had a political partnership with Soviet Union, and they entertained relations. There already was a process of European Union formation. In 1967, we know that there have been the Polish events, the Hungary events, and Andreotti opened the office of the Chamber of Commerce in Moscow to show and prove that the economic development between Russia and Italy and the relations was a strategic thing over time. It was not affected by contingent facts occurring in that time. This is something that should always be remembered, because the political class in Italy, with respect to Russia and vice versa, has always entertained long-term relations. We never came to a halt when considering the operational activities in the short terms or the activities conducted in a single day. Let me just say that Russia, at the times of the Soviet Union was suffering the boycotts of the United States in the food sector. Ever since then, Russia, that initially was a grain and cereal importer, has now become an export entity of the same materials. Let me just say that Russia is the 7th automobile producer worldwide, and we know that Russia only had Togliattigrad before. Let's see what happened meanwhile. No newspaper talked about this, but Russia this year, because of the results obtained with its foreign indebtedness, let me also say that amongst the worldwide bankers, this year was chosen Nebulina, who's a friend of mine, has been chosen and appointed the Banker of the Year. This is something that's never said in newspaper. This doesn't make headlines, whilst gossip does. But let me keep saying that today we should look at sanctions and counter-sanctions, and if we do so, that's a dangerous thing. It's also dangerous for our Russian friends. Let me just say that I'm also an expert in the refinery field, but also in the petrochemical sector. Today in Russia, there are some market distortions and market-biased situations, especially counter-sanctions also exist. So we have to be careful, dear friends, because if you think that notwithstanding the low cost of the raw materials, the petrochemical, which is the first stage of transformation of raw materials and of goods, we have a negative VAT, and the cost of the petrochemical in Russia costs 30% more than what's been used. So today it's better to sell in the internal market the petrochemical products rather than exporting them, because they wouldn't stand the prices. So it's much better to sell them in the internal market. Now this is a speculation, and I'm sorry to say that it was born and it goes on because of the very low cost of raw materials and because of old obsolete technologies in the production of the transformation and processing of plastic materials. And since there has been a quota market of products, now we know that there are 4 industries in this sector. They made agreements, and the prices on the market that they obtain are prices that are absolutely not corresponding to the market prices. So as I said, it's much better to produce and sell in the internal market rather than export products, and this is one of the distortions that are now existing. So it is true that Russia today has a very low cost of raw materials, and this is something that you have to consider, Alexander Shocking. You have to consider them well. So it is also true that in Russia we have a schooling and educational class of students that is very skilled and prepared, so much so that Russia in a year was growing its competitiveness areas and skills, and it was said that thanks to this education level and to the less stiff and rigid entrepreneurial activities, it is very important to know that whenever we have sanctions and counter-sanctions, we take care not to distort anti-biased sectors of the market, because Russia should be the most competitive, if not in Europe, at least worldwide. Now, I was really wanting to say all this and share it with you because unfortunately they are not well known, they're not correctly discussed and debated. We talk about general things, but we never get to the details. We never dig down into the details. Much has been said about the increase of retirement age or pension age. Cochrane declared, for example, that the government is not ready to raise the pension age to 65 years of age for both men and women. But it's also true that if you think that Russia has a life expectancy of 70 years, and we know that earlier on it was much lower, women, nonetheless, at the age of 70, the age of 70 may be reached by women, but not by men. And when it was Soviet Union, the life average expectation was 59. So obviously, it is not possible to change the pension age up to 65, because then no one will ever reach the pension age, the retirement age. And the same applies to women. These things are said, generically said, they are discussed by newspapers, but they are never benefiting from the real considerations of the situation, the real situation of the country. Just to give you an idea of the damages that are being created, and I would like to recall this and remind this to our own ministers, damages provoked by the exports in the textile and the shoemaking sector, because they've gone down by 38% on a yearly basis. Machines and tools, industrial tools, exports have gone down by 31%. The chemical products exports by 39%. The food products have gone down by 29% and 31% at the same time. Why am I saying all this? Well, I'm saying this because in a moment like this, and here I'm referring back to petrochemistry, Italy is the European country which could best exploit all of the spin-offs and the spin-off products of this sector. Today we have a highly skilled manpower in Italy, but whenever we need to work and to consider the automobile sector, whenever we have to make the steel and stainless steel parts of the car, that's obviously the minority activity. But in Russia, the seventh automobile producer worldwide, this is exactly what's missing. The plastic parts, plastic components cannot be made, and that's a sector where there are great speculations, where the great profits are made. So in Russia there is no intention of manufacturing plastic components that are useful for automobile sectors, for household appliances, and there are many Italian factories, and some of them are worldwide leaders, if not in the world, at least leaders in Europe. So all of them are producing plastic materials and plastic components that are highly specialized. Most of them are not just been manufactured by Italy and then go to Russia, but they go first to Germany, then from Germany, after having been enriched by Italian components, they are being exported to Russia. And the same applies to the automobiles that are being produced in Moscow. The same applies also to the Japanese. Now, we have incredible maneuvering room from the small, medium business point of view. We do not export heavy trucks and heavy lorries or heavy submarines, but our exports can never be exported to the German ones or to the French or Japanese ones. We are obviously exporting small pieces, but we fragment them in so many sectors. So in order to help the Italian industry, the Italian government should just simply go and take a look at the sectors where we are active. And whenever they present to Vladimir Putin the 10, 15 Italian large entrepreneurs, leader entrepreneurs, well, they don't need to be introduced and presented to Vladimir Putin because they well know the possibility of going and sell on the market. The point is that there are some 300, 400 small and medium businesses that have the capacity, the skill, the technology, but unfortunately they have no economic power, no political decision-making power to be present in a market just like Russia.